And welcome, Raising Your Game. Today, I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking all things inner game. Tuesdays are for sports and sports parenting. Fridays are for everyone. And today, we have a brand new guest, Molly.binger. Molly is a financial advisor with the Concilium Wealth Group based in the Twin Cities, part of Ameriprise. I believe, Molly, we met through a family connection. Anyway, Thank you so much for doing this. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David. Nice to join you.
It's going to be fun. So we will start with our ups and downs segment. What things were lifting us up this week? What things are pulling us down, making life harder? So I'll go first with this one. In my ups column this week, I got two things and both are family related. The first one, I can already tell it's going to choke me up just talking about it, but I'm really a sucker for that kind of thing. But our son, Peter, he's 17, about to turn 18, got a job at a coffee shop here in town, been working there for a while. And I stopped in the other day to grab some lunch. I had a gift card I was going to, cash in. And he was working behind the counter. And there I go again. It just really dropped me just to see him there. Gosh, I'm having a hard time talking about it. It's crazy. Just seeing him interact with customers, seeing kind of how he is in the world with other people. Just such a lovely young man. It's really impressive. Well, another little thing. One of his classmates, a girl, he's had been a friend since they were in kindergarten. They live about a mile away. She's working there also in the kitchen, so I can see her through the window making my lunch. Just the whole thing just sort of dropped me. And I got to move on from that or I'll keep crying. The other one, we have a thing I started, and I'm just so psyched about this. Back when Peter was born, so 18 years now, once a year between Christmas and New Year, we sit down on the couch and just turn on the video and say, what happened this last year? And we did it again this year, and it's been 18 years in a row. I kind of can't get over that we've been doing it for that long. And just what a wonderful thing that is to have it, and to watch the kids. So a couple, 3 years of just Peter and us, and then Francis was born, and they're getting older and older and older, and watch them through the teen. It's just so remarkable. And every year, so we cut one, the latest one, and then I go in and edit it and put it on the DVD, and I get to look through all of them and just have that beautiful kind of reminiscing. Obviously we all take pictures, but video is so different. And to just be able to see that progression, I love it so much. And one little funny thing I realized this year, again, 18 years, same couch. We've had the same green couch for that whole time, and it's still in pretty good shape. So that's another, it sort of brings out the differences in us because the scene is baked. Even though we moved from Minneapolis 12 years ago, had the couch back then too. Anyway, that's one of the best things I've ever done. I'm just so thankful I did that. And this will be the last year we were all living here. Next year, Peter will be off at college. Hopefully he'll be home from college and we'll be able to gather quickly and do it there. But what a wonderful thing. And it just lights me up to do it, and especially to be able to re-engage with that history and seeing the kids grow over all those years. So those are my two ups. For my down this week, it's not a very big thing. I was just kind of looking for one. But basically the one I came up with was, it's been a super busy couple of weeks for me. And I realized that, so it's been busy enough that I've kind of interrupted my workout rhythm a little bit. I got into a really great rhythm this last year, a couple times to the gym, a couple of runs, particular days. And there have been just a couple, 3 days where I've had to change that. I couldn't do it one day. I had to move it to another one. And you wouldn't even normally think it was a problem at all, but I can tell, even with just one, number one, it just bums me out. I struggle a lot with, okay, am I going to do it today or not or whatever? But then when you do miss one, you can sort of see the slippery slope potentially down the road a bit, So again, it's a small thing, but I did notice, number one, how attached I become to my workout rhythms, and how much it throws me off a little bit when they get knocked out of whack somehow. So those are my ups and downs. Molly, how about you this week? You have anything worth reporting on?
Well, I can't really compete with that video idea. That's excellent.
Oh
I
my
might
gosh.
need to steal that just because there is something so special about seeing kids grow up on video and how their voices and
Oh my God.
bodies continue to grow. And so I might need to steal that. That's a fabulous kind of New Year's thing to do. But for me, I would say this week, it's just been so beautiful here.
Mm.
And we had this huge snowstorm last Wednesday and Tuesday, both days actually. And then there was something about it, it just settled on the trees and never left. And the sun was shining. And anyway, our team had an outing on Friday, and I drove for half an hour out into the country, and there were these hills, and all the trees are just white, and it's pretty magical when that's the case and it's not negative 25 degrees where you can actually enjoy it. So that's a pretty special thing if you're a winter fan, and our family is. And I would say the second is Sunday, we had a get together. My sister's in town from Virginia, and I went down there, and the kids were all just playing in the snow. And there's something so energetic about seeing kids just play together with cousins and have fun.
Mm.
And they're so energetic and enjoying the simple things. And it kind of brings you back to, we all have a lot going on in life and work and everything, but to just step away and enjoy simple pleasures and get some energy out, and it's free and fun, can be such a blessing. So I'd say those are my ups. Downs, I just had really poor sleep. It's kind of like your workout thing.
Oh.
It's like if you have really poor sleep a couple nights in a row, and who knows what it was, brain racing or getting back into routine of school and work after winter break, and, a lot trying to pick up pieces of things, and it can really just kind of wipe you out. So getting back to that routine of, you know, maybe turning phone over, none of that stuff, and
Yeah.
encouraging good sleep can give you such a boost.
Those are both great. The story about the kids, especially with cousins, there's something about cousin play, but many times I can think of times where I'm just, again, exactly the same thing. Our cousins live in town here. They're cousins. They've grown up with them, but I'll see them doing stuff together and just be filled with this warm rush of what a lovely life they're having, and how great that feels for them and for us, putting them in a position to have that. But the sleep one, that's huge. I mean, sleep is like number one for me. And even in the work I do with people, they think we're doing this sort of esoteric mental game work, and the first thing I'll say is, okay, well, how's your sleep doing? Because everything just falls apart, relatively, no matter what you're trying to do. If an example comes to mind, like dieting. If you're trying to manage your appetite, forget about it if you have a bad night's sleep. At least that's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm back
Do
on
you
track.
have some things that in mind that, like you mentioned the phone, are some specific things you have in mind that make you think, oh, that may be a contributor, or sometimes you just nothing to put your finger on?
I think sometimes it can have to do, if there's even, I think of text messages or emails and how easy it is to miscommunicate with people. And if that then kind of can lead to driving a wedge, and then your brain gets,
Oh,
on the rat race of, who's right or
oh,
wrong,
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that can just, I think that plus maybe not putting yourself in good habits of what you eat or drink before bed, and the spiral just goes, and pretty soon, everybody's asleep and the clock's ticking, and it's
Oh,
3 a.m.
yeah,
So I think it
yeah.
is so mental, but I think a huge part of it in today's day and age is driven by the miscommunication and things that can happen through these technology sources that are supposed to give us ease of communication and
Mm-hmm.
ability to be together when we're apart, right?
Yeah, yeah. Ariana Huffington has this. Ariana, I guess, has this funny. I think she's the first person I heard this, but she established this rule for like no devices in the bedroom, because that was a big thing for her. She'd be checking and reading and stressed out by all that stuff on there. And she actually made these little tiny beds, like for the phone. and she puts her phone bed like outside of her bedroom and tucks it in to its own bed before she goes into her own bedroom.
Well, that's a fun, creative idea.
Super creative. Yeah, fun. All right, that's excellent. Well, thank you. Those are our ups and downs. Coming up next, our Raise Your Inner Game weather report. All right, our inner game weather report. How's your inner gravity today? And what does the coming week look like? So, Molly, I'll have you go first with this one. And it's super easy, but basically, how are you doing today? How's your inner game today? And what does your coming week look like?
Today is great. You know, coming out of last week and snow days and a lot of chaos, I feel like I kind of took the bull by the horns this week. And I actually am coming off of a 4-day juice cleanse. And I do that every once in a while where it's just, pressed fruits and vegetables and nuts. And so I feel fabulous. I love doing that. It's also kind of a fun mental game for me where I don't, it's amazing how many times during the day or week we find ourselves thinking about what we're going to be having for the next meal or how much mental space that takes and not needing to think about what I'm going to cook the family for dinner or anything and just letting them do their thing is kind of really freeing for me. So I'm in a great weather space this week and feeling like I can now kind of re-enter the food space and be healthy and have a good kickstart for the new year.
That's excellent. I totally relate to that idea of when you free yourself from that constant thinking about what you're going to eat. It really is kind of remarkable to even notice it. There was a couple of times this last year where I would do, maybe the year before, like a potato diet where all I would eat was potatoes, every meal, every day. And that was that same thing I noticed was like, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have now because I know what I'm going to have. Anyway, that's super great.
Yeah.
Me also pretty good today. Reasonable night's sleep. It's a little gloomy outside. I don't love that, but it's okay. And then looking ahead, I'm going to check my calendar real quick. I think my week coming up is pretty nice and wide open. So that's what makes it nice for me is if I look out, we don't have a ton of family things planned. I just know I'm going to look ahead and be able to get a lot of stuff done. So that's kind of my favorite thing versus, like example, the holidays is the perfect example of the opposite where there's stuff coming up. There's a lot to get ready for. There's the gatherings. There's all kinds of stuff. And you just know it's going to be kind of hard. And that's kind of the whole point of this is it's super helpful to just devote some of your attention to how you are internally at any given time and what's coming. So you're not always reacting to stuff, but you can sort of look ahead and say, okay, this is going to be a little harder. I'm going to have to watch out for that, not let it, knock me off too much. So that's the idea. And that is our inner game weather report. So you out there, how are you doing? How are you feeling today? And what do you expect in the coming week? Think about that, and we'll move on to our top stories. Okay, top stories. The thing I want to talk about this week, actually, I'm hearing everybody talk about it, but it's this new artificial intelligence chatbot called ChatGPT. Molly, we were talking a little bit before. You hadn't really heard about it much, but for some reason, the circles I'm in, I was just hearing a lot about it, and I tried it out a lot. And I'm just kind of blown away with it. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit because there's a lot of implications with it. If you don't know, like I say, it's an AI chatbot. So your interaction with it is just like you go onto some sort of customer service site somewhere and you're interacting with them via chat. And it's programmed to speak to you as if it's a conversation. So it'll say, how are you doing? And if you push back on something, it'll say, oh yeah, sorry, that wasn't clear. It's very much, again, designed to mimic a real conversation. Another thing that's really unique about it is it knows what was said before. So if you put something in initially and it responds to you, you can respond to what it said and continue the conversation like a real conversation would. A great example. I wanted to share this, but the system's got so much attention lately. It's sort of overloaded, and I couldn't get into my previous conversation. But I asked it to write a haiku about the winter in the Midwest or something in a cold climate, and it was really great. I mean, it created one, but then it didn't have the right syllable count, and I would type back in, it seems like your syllable count is off. And it would say, oh, yeah, I apologize for that. I'm just an AI or something. And here's another one. And it would do it. And it took about 3 or 4 times for it to get the count right. But it did. It kept trying slight variations on it. And it finally got one. And it wasn't great, but it was pretty good. It was a haiku. And, it's an AI system. So it was pretty impressive. There's all kinds of things, specific things you can ask it to do. Writing for you, giving you information, giving you translations of things. It's really remarkable. And it's just really, it's so big. I don't know if you pay attention to this kind of thing either, Molly, like the SpaceX with their landable reusable rockets and all that. And it seems like a funny connection, but there was a time a couple of years ago now, I guess, maybe even more than that, when you saw the video of the very first time they were able to have one of their rockets land itself. And it was like a goosebump moment for me. It was like so historic and transformational and disruptive. Like I can't hardly believe I'm alive in this time to witness that. And this feels like that to me. It feels that kind of historic, epic, big deal. And by the way, Molly, you mentioned you hadn't heard about the chatbot, but have you heard about the thing where they generate images from a text description? Have you seen any of those things?
No.
It's even more mind-boggling. It's the same organization. I think these are called DALL-E, to take on the movie WALL-E.
Oh, yeah.
DALLE. I'll have a link to these in the notes. But with this, it's like, oh my God, you just can't believe it. You'll say something like a picture of a teddy bear skateboarding in Times Square. And it will create an image that is exactly that. And you could not imagine it's not a real picture. Or a painting of a fox in a field in the style of Matisse. And you just won't believe it. I mean, you've got to go check this out. You can't get your head around it. It's like, it's not possible.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Or a penciled drawing in watercolor of an astronaut riding a horse. And there are these beautiful creative images. This, to me, because I do a lot of blogging and stuff, and you spend a lot of time looking for images you can use, and they're super expensive, and it just takes you forever to find one that you like, because you don't want to use those terrible, stock photo ones. I mean, this by itself, to be able to go in and say, okay, here's what I'm looking for, here's the kind of tone I need, just describe it and have it spit it out, it's just crazy huge. And of course, like you hear people, and even if you try it now, if you try this ChatGPT, you can sort of tell, like if you have it write an assignment for you, write a paragraph on a subject, it makes some mistakes. The grammar is essentially correct, officially correct, but it gets a little bit, sometimes it feels like it's being written by somebody who maybe English isn't their first language, just a little bit, or like it's a kid or something. Mm-hmm. But this is the first version. I mean, it's going to get better and better and very, very quickly. And what is it going to mean when we can't tell anymore? When we really can't tell? So it just kind of blows the mind. I was showing it to Margaret a little bit the other day, my wife Margaret, for those of you who don't know. Molly knows. And our first thoughts both went to medical triage. She said nurses are doing this kind of thing all day long. Somebody contacts them at urgent care and says, I got an itchy thing on my shoulder. I don't know what's going on, This sort of a AI could definitely handle that. You could totally imagine it taking care of that. People who work, early on lawyers, doing sort of tedious, repetitive kind of stuff. There's going to be a lot of people not doing that work anymore. Mm-hmm. And just for me, I mean, the one thing about this particular system is it's a beta. And it'll even tell you when you first log in. I don't really know anything newer than September of 2021. So you can't really use it for, what's the weather like tomorrow? That kind of question you might type into Google or whatever, or, the Oscars list this year. But again, that's temporary. That's just this version. But the flip side of that is, when you do a search on Google now, it tells you, it gives you a list of links with places you might go find the answer, right? Or sometimes they're maybe embedded in there. This gives you the answer. I mean, it's so much more immediate and helpful. It's this narrative sort of form. I would think Google was nervous about this. I think it's going to change how we search, everything about how we interact with the internet. So that's the positive side. The downside, I can't even hardly get my head around them. But first of all, it makes mistakes, and it's hard to see them because it feels so trustworthy. It feels like an actual person is there giving you sourced information. And it's going to be hard to know or even have an instinct that maybe you should double check it somewhere. Sort of a bigger question after we spend time with it. You hear say that people have gotten worse with understanding directions because we all use GPS now, and it just tells us where to go. Or the people that get worse and worse spellers because spell check is fixing all of our spelling for us. I think this might make us lazy thinkers because a lot of thinking comes from writing. I mean, there's a famous quote from somebody who says, "I don't know what I think about something until I write about it." And so if we're not writing, if we're saying, give me a couple paragraphs on this subject, then we're the editor, not the writer. I think it might have some implications with that over time, just to really alter how we engage with just fleshing out ideas and thinking in the first place. I don't really know. And Molly, I know you said you haven't really even heard about it much before I mentioned it to you, but anything about it? It's just in
I
your own
think of
realm,
it, yeah,
striking now?
yeah, the positives and the negatives are there for sure. I think of a lot of negatives. Maybe that's a personality trait. But I truly think there's something so beneficial to putting pen to actual paper, when you're thinking through something, or, even, and then putting it into the digital format to do all of that. And I think we've gotten away from that a lot, but there's something maybe old fashioned, but also with our, really positive about that action that might be lost with how much now we utilize technology. And I think of this, I used to teach, I was an English teacher in Germany, and I think of, all the potential for utilizing these sorts of technologies for kind of faking your way through your education, right? And if you can give this sort of AI the ability to do your work for you and kind of pass off with a passing grade your whole life, if you're just a kid now, and how much more advanced this is going to become over the next 10, 20 years, that doesn't necessarily set you up to work hard, follow through, get better, make edits, use your own brain to the capacity that it can. I think if you're not exercising that muscle, all the other ones are not going to be at their best anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think about it, you know, uh, having kids write essays, it's not just about grammar, right? It's about thinking about a topic and engaging with it and kind of thinking what it means to you and organizing your thoughts into a sequence that makes sense and argues your case, making an effective argument even, And all that is purely about thinking. So I have heard a lot of people express concerns about kids just having this write their essays for them. And I think I've also heard that there are some discussion that they'll try and figure out ways to help teachers, like maybe some sort of watermark, even on it. So there's some way to keep them from doing that particular kind of thing to fake the work. But yeah, I would be super concerned. I am concerned about taking away the need to learn to think things through and form an opinion based on things that you've considered on your own. Yeah, it's so fundamental to being a human, being a citizen. That would concern me. That part of it. Now the technical writing, the getting taking over the really repetitive grind out stuff. Like I imagine, accountants or a lot of that work, or again, I think about lawyers especially. Now again, they'll have to find other ways to work, other ways to get paid. But I can imagine not losing a lot there. They're already adults. They're already in the world. They know how to do this work. It's just super tedious. I could
Mm-hmm.
imagine, or even like basic contracts. Here are the parties. Here are the terms. It could probably spit that out and be really helpful and accurate, very quickly. But if
What
it,
is
like you say,
interesting about AI and in the field that we're in the financial industry and in giving advice, is a few years back when AI started to become more and more prevalent, there was a lot of fear in, I think, put upon financial advisors that robo advisors and kind of online chats were going to take their place and become kind of this one size fits all replacement where we would be less desirable, if you will. And it's interesting that that may have been a concern for some who do kind of the check all the boxes and will tell you where your investments should be type of advice.
mhm,
But in no way it replaces one-on-one advice because that is so customized to the person and what makes them them and their values and what's at their core. And it in no way replaces that kind of personal relationship that's built there. So that I found is an interesting side effect where the robo advisor or these online check all these boxes and we'll get your dollars in your 401k how they should be kind of a thing, that
mhm.
may be a subsequent replacement for those types of people, but it does not replace kind of the what really makes you tick and where are your values and what are your goals
Yeah,
advice. That is such a
yeah,
human thing.
yeah. That totally makes sense to me, especially like on this subject, because I know for Margaret and I, um, such a huge part of the financial decisions are just either not understanding it, or being afraid of making bad decisions, and it's really the relationship and trusting the person we're working with and talking to, and that's never going to come from anything like this. I mean, in a similar way, I actually wrote a post earlier this week, and I talked more about the AI specifically and some of my concerns in that. If people are interested, I'll link to that. But the question for that was, is it going to, or is this particular one, the Chat GPT, is it going to affect like mental performance training? And pretty strong take in a similar case. It's just not, at least not for a while, um, for a bunch of different reasons, which I articulate in there. But same kind of thing. There's a lot of areas it's going to disrupt like crazy, but I don't think it's going to hit mine for probably quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I can totally see why it wouldn't do yours either. Although, at the kind of the face-to-face customer relationship kind of thing, maybe in the back end with some of the analysis and the report that analysts are putting out, some of those I imagine could be generated in ways that were actually helpful. But
Yeah, I do think there's already a lot of that. So
mm,
already the technologies and AI behind the scenes on what you can utilize for tools for, client deliverables and or, what bigger firms at home offices are utilizing for back end internal data science of
mm,
what they can glean from what people like or dislike on Facebook. And, they have all these sources of stuff coming in. And then from there can kind of spit out who's, the ideal client and in this range with these interests. And it's a pretty crazy, mind-boggling thing that, all these things are listening to us and tracking what we buy, and, that they can then turn that into this, oh, this person's your perfect client,
Oh, yeah.
based
Mm,
on their just demographics and what they do online. So it's
yeah.
pretty crazy.
That's, that's a little creepy.
Hmm. Very.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. That was our top stories. Next up, our quote of the week. Okay, our quote of the week this week, we're going to hear from, and this takes me back. I don't know if you'll know this name, Jean-Claude Killy. Do you know that name?
No.
Okay, so I'm quite a bit older than you. Back when I was a kid, he was a big star in my mind. He was a French ski racer, still alive, by the way, three-time Olympic medalist in 1968. So I was like 10 years old. And one of the big shows for me back then, TV shows, was The Wide World of Sports, ABC's Wide World of Sports. And they covered all kinds of sports they don't really cover so much anymore, like bowling, for example. But skiing was a big one, even though I didn't ski. And I loved Jean-Claude Killy, maybe because of the sound of his name. So beautiful. Anyway, his quote is, "To win, you have to risk loss. To win, you have to risk loss." And of course, just on its face, this is basically true. Any attempt to do something includes the risk of failure. But the real point for me is that you have to be willing to risk loss. You have to have the inner strength to step up and face the fear of failure. That's the hard part. And of course, it's true with everything of real value in our lives. The life you want is on the other side of your fears a lot of the time. So the best thing you can do to increase your chances of getting there, getting to the kind of life you want for yourself and your family, is to work on overcoming your fears. Having said that, I would also add, especially with our financial planning expert here, that you need to strike the right balance between risk and reward. You can definitely take too much risk as well. So you have to take some to get where you want to go, but you want to walk that line. But the part about having the courage to do it, the strength to do it, is all about, again, inner strength and mastering your inner game. So, Molly, I was just curious how this quote strikes you, especially the idea of risk and the importance of being comfortable taking it.
Well, there's a lot of ways you can look at risk. I think it's interesting that when people think, financial planning or financial advising and risk in the same sentence, they automatically think investments, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that you can take investment risk. But I would even, challenge it one step further to say risk can also be putting yourself out of your comfort zone just in how you think about making sure that you and your spouse or family or partner are on the same page in what your goals are, right? Or taking the risk to say that you want to try to do something that maybe you've never done before, and getting your teammates or your cheerleaders, right, on the same page as you. So I think often the first step in taking a risk and getting that courage and inner strength might first be just to say it out loud to the people that are your cheerleaders and your number ones. Because then once you've said it, it's out loud, it's out there, and people know that that's what you want to do. And now maybe you have the support system to kind of bolster that courage within you and make the change in your life. And that can be on the financial side of things, anything from small tweaks to, cash flow, but to get you to a longer goal. But even in life, I just think saying something out loud that maybe you want to make happen for yourself and telling your supporters can give you some extra courage.
Yeah. I'm guessing, but you can tell me, do you find yourself at times encouraging people to take less risk than they're thinking about doing, or is it more often the other way around? Take a little more.
I would say it's interesting. A lot of times with most of the clients that we have, we're encouraging them to take risks in their own life, more so by encouraging them to do the things that they want to do now.
Hmm.
I think a lot of financial wealth managers want you to delay, 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 right? And never spend the dollars that you've been saving for these future goals. And that's a little bit of a conflict of interest, right? Because if you encourage someone to gift to the charity or to spend the dollars on that family experience now, it leaves this bucket of wealth that you're managing, right? So I feel like most of the time for the clients that we have, we're encouraging them to do the things on their bucket list that they've been saving for. So that could be viewed as taking a risk, right?
Hmm.
Because you're spending dollars that are not going to be there for the unknown in the future. But we don't know that the future is guaranteed to any of us. So I feel like that's a lot of times the risk that we're encouraging
Hmm.
clients to take. On the flip side, you know, investment wise, we don't in our practice have clients, tell us what their risk tolerance is. That tends to be moderate any way you shake it, right? Because all of
Hmm.
us are human and all of us want growth and we don't want to see any downs, right,
Hmm.
in our portfolio. So if you fill out a questionnaire, it's pretty much guaranteed after you're done with that 10 question, you know, little
Hmm. Hmm.
automated thing that you're going to
That's
end
funny.
up moderate, right? And more so, we want clients to be an appropriate risk that matches their goals and what time horizon they have. And it shouldn't be about how they feel emotionally.
Yeah.
That's a separate thing.
So you don't have a bunch of people saying, I want to just put all my retirement savings into Bitcoin, for example.
No, we do
Okay.
not. We do
Well, good, because that would be dumb. Don't do that.
not. Well, I don't know. See, you don't ever know.
You never know. That's true. That's true. It's all about timing. Might have been genius for a little while, but lately
Right.
not
If
so good.
somebody has the magic 8 ball, you send it my way because we don't.
Yeah.
No one else can send it.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. So that's this week's quote. To win, you have to risk loss. Think about that, what risk you might need to take to get where you want to go, to not delay things too much, as Molly was saying, and what risks might be too much. Watch out for crypto right now. And we'll move on to raise your outer game. All right, raise your outer game. This is where we talk about things we care about in our outer life, our health, our relationships, our finances. And this week, because we have an actual expert with us, we're talking finances and money and how to raise your financial game. So, Molly, what would you like to talk about this week?
Well, I was thinking since it is January that going into kind of checking the pulse on your financial fitness, if you will, and how to think through moving into a new year financially is always a good place to start. In a new year, a lot can happen, and especially this time of year in January, there could be a plethora of things that are changing your financial situation just on a cash flow basis. So if I think about in the new year, all the things to think about, there's a ton. The first paychecks are probably about to, hit people's checking accounts, and those often now are going to be slightly different, right? Especially with inflation on healthcare premiums that will have just gone into effect if you're on a calendar year plan. That pay amount is probably going to vary a little bit. Also, things like, new tax rates on your mortgage, that's going to change that escrow amount. So there's a lot of things that shift, even if you don't intentionally shift anything yourself, that are good to get a pulse on before you really jump into the new year. So I think the main thing for a new year and thinking about your finances is really the word intention. If I'm coaching clients on building what they want their future financial life to look like, the first thing I would say is the most important is to really hone in on what your values are. So that doesn't even necessarily have to do with, how much is in your checking account or all the data that makes up who you are as a person financially. It more so has to do with you or you and your partner or you and your family sitting down. And there's something, it's actually done through a group called Think to Perform. And they're the ones who run the behavioral financial advice designation, and it's all about how the brain works. But
Mm.
basically, they have a free exercise you can do online. It's called their Values Cards exercise. There's, I think, 51 values that are on these cards. And the goal in first pass, you can do it as a couple, you do it individually, but then you also want to come to what your three goals are as a family, right? Your top goals. And the eventual goal is to narrow it all the way down to three primary values that you want all the decisions you make, whether financial or not, to represent. So, if that, for example, for a couple was adventure, uh, wealth, and security, right? That really then tailors what maybe they as a family want their goals to be. If adventure is a big one, then maybe having some sort of annual family adventurous, vacation, or making a point to be more adventurous on the things that they plan, even on a weekly basis, is important. But because security is in there, making sure appropriate emergency funds and maybe even a little bit more than the typical person, right, to give you that security blanket in case of need is maybe a bigger deal than for another person. And on
Mm.
the third point, if wealth is on there and just kind of that feeling as though I'm doing what I need to be doing and building this wealth bucket, then you really need to discuss what those savings amounts should be into vehicles that are going to get you there, right? And
Mm.
how those should be invested. So I would say, honing in on what your family values are is number one. And then from there, writing physically, paper, pencil in hand, writing down specifics as to what goals you want to reach, whether it be this year or way down the road into the future, especially with kids, and thinking through how you experienced college. How do you want to support your kids with that venture? Together is huge, because
Mm.
if you just are going into that and going to reactively decide that you're going to support children during that time, that can really bulldoze your own retirement
Mm.
planning, because no decision you make has no consequence, right?
Mm.
They all have a ripple effect. It's like the sliding doors movie, where if you go in the subway or don't go in the subway, you have two, separate lives. It's the
Mm.
same thing with our finances. If I buy the car or stick with the one I have, those can lead to two totally separate things if you're being intentional about where that car payment would otherwise be going. Right. So
Yeah.
I think of this financial fitness and just where you start as first honing in on your values and the goals. And then I think of just small things that all of us can do based on how our brains are wired in today's technological world, to make small tweaks on the habits we have to get us in a better position, financially speaking. So some of those, it's interesting in behavioral financial advice, it's so much about the brain and how we have these fight or flight instincts as human beings, which was really great when you were a caveman, and not so great in today's day and age when there's Amazon one click purchases and you sign up for streaming for 17 different platforms and forget about it.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
rat race continues with all the busyness that we handle in our lives. And before you know it, you are paying for who knows what because you don't even know because it's all automatic. And so the best thing I would do, I don't believe in budgeting. I think it's kind of like dieting, right? It works
Mhm.
for a while until you fall off the wagon. The best thing I would do to first hone in on what you have been putting your money towards as far as your values are concerned is just to print off in good old black and white your last 3 to 6 months of credit card and bank statements and get pink and a yellow highlighter or however you want to color code it and color code the needs versus the wants, right? And then just really when you get to the wants, hone in on which ones you really think support your values and what you're trying to teach your kids are important or that's really to what you feel is important, and which ones you're kind of like, I didn't even realize I was spending
Mm.
$250 a month on coffee. And
Yeah.
that's your best way to at least hone in on what have I been putting my money where my mouth is, and now are there things I could make small tweaks to moving forward. So that's a start, and I have a lot more ideas on the small tweaks and things that I've thought of as far as trying to minimize your exposure to temptation
Mhm.
um, on spending what's unnecessary, but that's just some first thoughts.
That's excellent. A couple of things come to mind. First, it's fresh to hear you say, like, for example, we don't talk about budgeting because everyone talks about budgeting. Um, but as you were talking about narrowing in on those three goals from 51, which sounds like a not necessarily an easy job, but I can imagine that it's a little more complicated too with a couple. Like maybe you're not engaging with that level, but is it difficult for people to come to the same three? And how important is it they have the same exact three? What do you see with that?
Typically, they're going to have a separate three, right? And so, I know, for most couples, you want that give and take, right? Most
Mm,
couples should have different values to some extent, right? So even if one, is um, integrity, family, and security, and the others is adventure. Even in doing the exercise, that's teaching each other about what your values are,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And to give some mutual respect to understanding, okay, that's his values, these are my values. How now do we come up by creating three common values for our family that we're going to dedicate as our family goals? So they can be separate, but I think even getting down to the final six, right, and understanding that, oh, your values are different than mine, and therefore maybe it's okay that you spend $250 a month on Amazon retail therapy because that more so aligns with your values and
mm,
doesn't with mine, right?
mm-hmm.
So maybe that now gives us some mutual understanding to be able to decide how we're going to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, I love just the whole idea of starting to just look at some of our how to put the situation we put ourselves in that leads to exposure to this kind of impulse, unconscious, programming based buying. It makes me think too, also in the category of super basic advice, but it seems to me maybe one more piece of evidence towards it being a great idea to just set up a certain amount of investment coming out of your investment slash savings coming out of your paycheck every month that you don't have to think about every month. It just happens automatically. I, how do you feel about that? How do you talk to your clients about
Yeah, so
that?
it's amazing how it's so much easier to sign up for a service that will charge you monthly than to pay yourself monthly. And once you've set that up, right, and you're contributing to the 401k without thinking about it, and contributing into your Roth IRA if you qualify without thinking about it, and saving into your savings account without thinking about it. The more automated you can be with paying yourself first, the better it will be long term, no matter what. That's just proven. But then, taking that a step further and being intentional about switching things over. So I think about, I always have a task set that when a client's car payment is over, right, you want to reach out and get that intentionally set up to go somewhere else, because as humans, our nature is, if that's now just sitting and starting to build and checking every month, when previously $450 a month or something was going out to this payment, it's going to get absorbed into
Yeah.
our spend, right? Because we all have that natural comfort level of how much we're willing to have the credit card balance be, or how much we're willing to have the checking account balance be. And the more you can kind of keep that at the right level and just have everything else automatically moving into the right different buckets, the better off you are long term.
Yeah, that's great. I'm reminded one of my all-time favorite pieces of financial advice. I've talked about it on an earlier pod, but from a guy named Mr. Money Mustache, which is a funny name. But you mentioned the bucket of wants versus nice to have, or whatever, however you said it. He had some advice on how to think about money you're going to spend for things. That's just been so helpful to our entire family. And it's just this: you're going to get way more value out of the money you spend on things that remove an annoyance from your life than add something you think might be a nice improvement. Because a lot of times you don't know what things are going to be like. You think you're going to want to use it, you think you're going to like it, and then maybe you don't. It's hard to predict that. But if it's something that's bugging you regularly, and all of a sudden that's gone now, that's a way better return on that spend. So whenever, even our kids, it's been years now, but they totally get it. Whenever we're talking about getting something new, that would be something we would talk about as a family, it always comes up. Is that removing an annoyance? What annoyance is that removing? Versus just, I want a new pair of shoes. Super helpful as you're going through that sort of process of looking at what you have been spending and sort of trying to just see how it aligns with your values. If you can add that into the formula, I found that super helpful. Another thing I think, speaking of unhelpful impulse sort of spending, I'm really concerned about the whole buy now, pay later thing that seems to be exploding so much the last couple of years, like the interest-free, buy this thing in 3 or 4 payments. Are you seeing much of that in your work?
We don't have too much of that. I will say I see it quite often just as I do my own, managing of credit cards and whatnot. It's amazing how often you'll get that little offer pop up to say, do you want to split this, or do you want to divide this into however many months of payments or whatnot. So I could see that if that was how you were wired a little bit more, that they make it so easy. And I do think it's something that people need to watch out for, because then, before you know it, it's the danger of all these payments happening all the time, and it becomes more and more daunting. I think of it in the sense of a person that, has a really hard time biting the bullet when it comes to cleaning, right? And the more and more messy it becomes, the more paralyzing it is to get a handle on it, right? Because it's such a big job at the start.
Yeah.
So the more automatic payments you have going towards all these services and cards and loans and things, the more daunting the task of even getting a handle on what you are paying for becomes. And the simpler you can have things, the better. It just is so much more mental free time to focus on what really matters.
Yeah, and like you say, when there's too much, you just disengage, right? If it's too complex or overwhelming or whatever, you just don't even do it at all. You don't even think about it. I remember a good friend of mine said one time, we didn't start paying, and he was a super smart, responsible, financially savvy kind of guy, at least my sense of him. But he was saying, my wife and I, we didn't even do anything smart with our money. That's not even how I was going to say it, but until we finally got like out of credit card debt. There was something about, when they were carrying that debt, there was so much extra sort of psychological baggage with it that it kept them from paying any attention to anything in their financial life. And then as soon as they finally they must have done something right because they finally got out of that. But as soon as they got out of that credit card debt, at that point, all of a sudden, the lights came on and they started paying attention to how much they were saving and investing, all that. But they completely avoided it, ignored it for most of their life up until that point. And I think that's kind of the psychology of it. It's just so easy to look away when it's even a little bit overwhelming. And that's especially true for me with finances, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And student loans can do that too, quite frequently. So we see that a lot where, having that balance out there because of how confusing they make it and the loan process of having, by the time a kid graduates, if they're taking loans, they might have 8 to 12 different loans with different numbers and interest rates and all these different payment structures. And it's really daunting, so to even go into the website and help them look through it where you're saying, okay, here's how this is really structured. And here's which one we need to focus on first. And you're going to get that done by next September. Just getting a plan in place for that sort of elimination, I think, can then be like, oh, okay, now I can move on and, just work. And I think with the automatic savings thing and getting to the point where, okay, if you've set a goal and you know your values and now you just know I'm putting money in these buckets to get me to these different goals with different time horizons, just as I should be, right? What I think that leads to eventually, and what I hope is the case for most of our clients, is really guilt-free spending, right? Whether it's on a vacation or, the car payment or whatever it might be, if you just know, okay, we're automatically doing what we've been told that will get us to our goals, and we're doing that without even thinking about it. Now there's something really freeing about not needing to feel guilty, right, about the Starbucks coffee treat or the whatever, right? So I think that's the eventual goal with anything, is you get your ducks in a row so much that you can kind of breathe and just say, okay, now all the other stuff is my, fun.
That's really great. I mean, so I think it's not very often you associate thinking about your finances with peace of mind, especially, early and middle in life. It's like all just, future and risk and all that stuff. But I love that if you can be confident that you're doing what needs to be done, you can take a breath and you can be more relaxed and just enjoy your life as you're living it with the leftover funds you have. That's great. That's an excellent conversation. Thank you very much. All right, super helpful, I'm sure, for folks. So next up, we will go and talk about inner game gold. All right, inner game gold. So these are the ideas and concepts I come back to over and over to help me stay on track. And this week, this is one of the absolute foundations of mastering your inner game. It's the insight that turned things around for me, my Wizard of Oz moment story, if you know that from the book. It's the insight at the heart of the Inner Game of Tennis book, that classic book that started this whole movement, really. It's the insight that started Eckhart Tolle on his path. It just really is the key to the whole thing. And here it is, and it is deceptively simple. But it says, you have thoughts, but you are not your thoughts. You have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. By extension, you have emotions, but you're not your emotions. You have a body, but you're not your body. It's easy to see this idea when you think about the body aspect. Like if, for some reason, God forbid, you lost a finger or whatever, doesn't change who you are. You just don't have a finger, right? You still feel like the same person. But it's every bit as true, and maybe even more powerfully true, with the thoughts part. So in the Raise Your Inner Game book, we have a diagram that illustrates the inner game, and one of the core elements of that image is that there's this building with the 4 levels, and off to the side of that building is you separate from that. And the whole idea is it's illustrating that you are separate from those aspects of yourself. Again, you have thoughts, but you are not your thoughts. This fundamental duality, there are two of you in there. There's you, and there's the other one who is basically not your friend. Again, this is the key to the whole thing. As soon as you experience this and internalize it, it instantly starts to free you from the things that give us so much trouble in our inner lives. And the more you live with it and work with it and you know what it means, the more power you gain over your inner game. So this is the core idea I return to again and again to get me back centered and focus on what's really important in being the person I want to be. And I want to give a little shout out to the person who I actually remember first articulating this to me, which was my dad way back when. He's gone now, but when I was maybe even 10, like that young, 10, 13 sort of range, I remember him saying, if you want to know who you are, you're the one who hears the voice in your head. I didn't really get it then. And there's still parts of that maybe could be said a little better. But that's the idea. It's the same idea. There are two of you in there. There's you and the other one who's talking to you, and they are not your friend. So anyway, that's my inner game gold this week. I really encourage you to write that one down, keep it around, come back to it now and then. That one idea can open up a whole new world for you as it has for so many other people. Molly, I wonder, have you ever heard that basic idea that, or something that kind of illustrated that duality, that inner duality we all have?
Yeah, I feel like I remember reading a book about that. It had to be like 12 years ago or
Hmm.
so. And it's interesting that in the work that we do, you see that a lot where you do see that, we all have that ourselves, but you see it from the client perspective because the emotions that go along with people's money are intense.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very emotional thing to work with someone and determine, where they should be spending, saving, doing what with their money. But also the emotions that go along with investments are intense. And obviously, we've seen a lot of that. And so you have to really bring it back to that duality a lot of times to say, have expressed to us that these are your goals, and I know they are, and what you have is still true to those goals. So despite that inner voice and that emotion
Mm.
and the fear that can go along with that, there's there's still appropriateness to what I know the true you has said and how things are structured. And so we're not going to make any erratic changes based on that inner
Mm.
voice. So you see that duality come through a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
in
That's
this
interesting.
field, which is really interesting to kind of look at it from that other perspective.
So it's sort of like their emotional self is taken over in those moments, in those conversations. And that's really, that's one of the core things we sort of bring to light in the book, and the content in that book is that as those 4 layers I talked about in that building, well, it's physical, emotional, intellectual, and you at your best. And the idea is that when you're on that intellectual level, that's taken over. It's altering what you think, how you act, everything is turning you into that kind of person. And the same thing is true on all 4 of those levels. And the problem we get into, and it's like everybody, I mean, it's very few people who've really kind of clicked into that duality awareness so that it really helps them regulate better, um, is that we identify so much. Like those emotions come up, and I'm sure when you're in those conversations with them, they totally identify with that perspective, right? And that's what you're saying. You're having to click them back out of there. You're like, well, let me just remind you of the other you that was in here last week saying these were your values, basically. Yeah,
Right.
that's great.
And
Yeah.
and to bring it into the context that none of these things swirling around us all the time impact who you are, right? Or impact what really matters. So truly, whether your, retirement account at work is 900,000 or 600,000 today on paper, does that really impact your ability to do all the things this year that you were planning on doing?
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. Not one bit,
Yeah.
right? So you
Yeah.
kind of have to bring it back to, can you still live the lifestyle you want and have the same outcome? Yes, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of
Yeah.
kind of saying, let's throw the mirror on here and make sure you know that you still look the same,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter what those
Yeah.
other things are doing.
That's excellent. All right. Thank you. So yeah, that's the goal for this week. You have thoughts, but you are not your thoughts, which leads us directly into our coming up next, our charging station challenge of the week. I was getting a kick out of that epic music there. So last week we had you taking action, trying to break your goals and aspirations down into one or two practical things you could do over the week. Maybe make an appointment, for example, find someone to work with on something, things like that. I hope we're able to do that, but more important, that the idea itself will help you going forward. One step at a time. What's the next thing I can do? That's the key to making consistent progress towards your goals, no matter what those goals are. So I hope you enjoyed that. This week, I want you to think about the idea we just talked about. You have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. I want you to really let that sink in as much as it can, become as real as possible for you. I already talked about how powerful and important it is, how transformational it can be. So I want you to spend some time with it, see if you can't make something of it for yourself. So the specific challenge is just make some sort of a plan this week to sit down for a couple of minutes every day. Just kind of hang with it, sit with it. Again, you have thoughts, but not your thoughts. You have emotions, but you're not your emotion. You have a body, but you're not your body. See if you can really connect with the idea. Just kind of really observe it in your life and write down any thoughts that come up with you, for you about it. I think you really enjoy what this exercise does for you. As always, I'll post the challenge in the community if you want to do it along with other people. If you're not in the community yet, click the link in the notes. It's free. Just register, and you can go straight into the challenge. And that's it for this week's Charging Station Challenge. Next up, highly recommended. All right, so this is just things I'm crazy about right now. Books, shows, gadgets, things I love and recommend. And I've been talking a lot, so Molly, why don't you go first with this one? What are you recommending, excited about this week?
Yeah, I just finished listening to a book called Captivate on audio. It's by Vanessa Van Edwards, and she's actually the one that reads it. And if you know anything about her, she does the science of being human. She has a great website and all kinds of interesting things you can learn about how people communicate. But it's just a phenomenal book. Lots of learning as it relates to people's personality types, how to make the most of your communication with people of different communication styles, and just putting your best self forward in who you are, not trying to adapt to whatever, the room is that you're walking into. So
What's it
I
called
loved
again?
it. It's really great.
What's it called again?
Captivate.
Captivate.
Yeah, by
And it's a
Vanessa Van
book.
Edwards.
Vanessa. Great. I will put that in the show notes for sure.
And I think her website is the science of being human, something like that. But if you look up Vanessa Van Edwards, there's tons of fun YouTube videos and games and stuff that she has on her website that are really fun and
Cool.
very entertaining.
I will definitely check that out. Is that's your recommendation this week?
That's unless you like watching Survivor. That's my recommendation. Our
That's
family's
excellent.
big into Survivor. The kids
Oh
have all their
man.
votes on who's going to win.
My God, I can't believe that show's still going. I cannot believe
Still
it.
going, and the prize is still $1 million, even 21 years later.
$1
So no
million.
inflation on that, apparently.
We probably watched it 21 years ago. That's great. I have a show on the top of mind this week. It's Slow Horses on Apple TV. It's a pretty short series. It's like a little disappointing actually because I'm in it so much. But like the second season, it's only 6 episodes. But it's just so great. Of course, you can't get it unless you're an Apple TV subscriber. So not everybody can do that. But it's one of those rare things. Margaret and I both love it. The acting is just incredible. It's a spy show. I tend to like those. Part of that is because, there's always a mystery element. And also, if it's well done, you have no idea what's coming, right? It's all layers and layers of deception. And oh my gosh, it's just really well done. So I've been loving that. The other, I've talked about it a little recently, but I'm just reminded again. And it's funny to me to even mention it. But anyway, it's this NFL app. We don't have a TV here that gets us local broadcast. I can't watch games. I've really gotten out of the habit of watching football games. I kind of forgot that I even liked it, honestly. And also, part of what made me think it was okay was that when am I going to get 3 hours to just sit around? I mean, it's just our lives just don't have that kind of room in them. I would never feel justified or even interested really to park myself in front of the TV for 3 hours. So I'd gotten away from it. But I picked up this app a month or so ago, and it's getting me all hooked on watching football again. For one, you can get the game you want. You can watch any game on there. You're not restricted by your market. We were in Minneapolis before, so I'm a Vikings fan, but we're in Wisconsin now. And if there's a game on, I'm going to the Packers game, not the Vikings game, so I can watch the game I want. But the best part is because it's an app, I can still do all of my tasks around the house. I can walk around the house. I mentioned this earlier, but there was one day I actually went to the car wash. Like I drove across town to get the car washed. I'm sitting there in line at the car wash watching the game on my phone. And it's just so much more convenient that it's kind of reinvigorated my love for NFL. So I'm just very thankful for that and kind of laughing at myself to even be in that spot. But that's mine this week. anything more? I know it's funny because there's a family in town, really funny. I think he's Vikings and she's Packers. And they always have these big watching parties over at their house, and it's really fun. And I got invited to the playoffs game this weekend, and I'm sure it'd be super fun. But part of me is like, I got a lot of stuff to do around the house. Maybe I should just stay home and watch it on my phone instead. I probably should do the social thing, but yeah, it's really been very helpful. And by the way, exciting year for the Vikings.
Very.
Because you're in Minnesota, right? Yeah.
We're in Minnesota, and yes, my husband's a diehard, lifelong Vikings fan, and my son is a young, lifelong 10-year-old Vikings fan. So lots of excitement, for sure.
That's a lot of fun. All right, that's excellent. All right, that is highly recommended, and that is it for today's episode. Molly, thank you so much for joining us. It's really been fun. I just really appreciate you coming on and spending this time with us. How can people find you, get hold of you if they want to reach out or for whatever reason? Where would you point them? And we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, well, it's Molly.binger, and like David mentioned, I am on a team practice out of the Minneapolis area, but it's Concilium Wealth Group, and Concilium's actually Latin for counsel, so it's kind of about giving advice. And it's an Ameriprise practice, so even if you Googled Molly.binger, Ameriprise advisor, it'd probably pop up. But also my email is molly.binger@ampf.com for Ameriprise Financial, the AMPF. And our office line is 952-857-1444. If anyone has any questions on anything, just feel free to reach out.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you. I encourage you to do it, folks. Molly's the best. All right, so end of the show. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends and rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. It helps. You'll find the show, of course, and get a helpful mental game boost. If you're listening to this on audio, but you like video, we post all our episodes on YouTube as well. We have our channel there. There's a link to that in the show notes. For more mental game goodness, please join our free community, the Raise Your Inner Game Charging Station. There's a link here, or you can go to raiseyourinnergame.com/community. It's totally free. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. If you'd like to support the show, so we can keep things ad-free, please click the Buy Me a Coffee link below, and thank you very much for that. If you have teenagers in sports, check out our Mental Game Starter Kit. It's a great set of resources to get you started on the path of helping your child boost their mental game. So important. So again, raiseyourinnergame.com, scroll to the bottom, you can learn about it there, and register. It's all free, of course. Super helpful. And finally, we'll close with Steve Prefontaine, speaking of sports, legendary long-distance runner. His quote from the end of the Raise Your Inner Game book: "To give anything less than your best is to sacrifice your gift." That's what we're doing, folks. We're working to be our best. It is the gift that keeps on giving, and the world needs as much of it as it can get. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you next time.